him.
I want to watch the news.
Are you making headway at least?
This is the news.
Schmack-a-magob, it's time for the only news that matters. And former Iron Maiden vocalist Paul Di'Anno has distanced the band from the new wave of British heavy metal in a new interview. Talking exclusively in the current issue of Metal Hammer, Di'Anno has said that Maiden felt no kinship with the rest of the early 80s UK metal scene, also composed of Def Leppard, Venom, Saxon, and more, and that his band were like leading the charge. He said, nah, we felt like we were out on our own. Those journalists couldn't pigeonhole us. We were a heavy metal band, but we played fast like a punk band, but with all these complicated riffs. They didn't know how to label us, so they called us New Wave of British Heavy Metal. Next thing you know, every band is jumping on that one. Di'Anno also spoke about Maiden's debut single, Runnin' Free, released in 1980 to promote their self-titled debut album that I bought back in 1980 when I saw that record cover. I didn't know, I never heard of Iron Maiden in my life, and I had to leave that store with it. And yeah, I put it on and it blew my fucking mind. Now mind you, at the time, you know, I'm this little kid in Hialeah, Florida. You know, I don't have that much access, or did I even look for that type of access about the new wave of British heavy metal. None of that registered over here till like a couple of years later is when I started hearing the term. But back then, it was just heavy metal. And, you know, what Di'Anno's saying, you know, it may be true, but in retrospect, looking back, they were the leaders of the new wave of British heavy metal. There's no doubt about it. It's just like us looking back at AC/DC in 1980. When we look back at AC/DC in 1980, we think, well, back then they called this heavy metal. This ain't heavy metal. And that's how I feel about new wave of British heavy metal. Yeah, we weren't really a new wave of British heavy metal. Yeah, but in retrospect, you were the leaders. I remember having On Through the Night that year as well. And, you know, of course, Back in Black and Women, Children First. I got, you know, a good mix of hard rock and metal through. I can't remember if I got Strong Arm of the Law in 1980. I know I got it either in 80, 81, but it was around that time frame. I got Strong Arm of the Law before Wheels of Steel. And I like that album more now. Maybe it's because of that. Maybe it's because I heard, you know, the Strong Arm of the Law. I think that's the best one they released in 80, even though Wheels of Steel rules, but also Denim and Leather is my favorite Saxon album. I mean, I was pretty clueless. I mean, back then, I never heard of Venom. And I didn't discover Venom till I bought Black Metal in 1982 when I used to go to this import shop. But yeah, see, that I remember. By 1982, I did know all about the, you know, new wave of British heavy metal, because at that import shop, I would buy Kerrang! They had Kerrang! There, which was an import, you know, magazine that was a really awesome magazine at that time. They turned to total shit afterwards. But yeah, that's where I started to discover bands through that magazine. I'd go to that import shop. I'd buy albums just by the sight of it. I remember buying Raven, Rock Till You Drop, Slayer, Show No Mercy, Venom, you know, the Black Metal, just by looking at the album covers. I don't know what these bands sound like. Slayer, I did read in a magazine. I remember that classic picture of them with the, you know, the macabre makeup with the girl. I did remember reading about them, but I took a chance because Show No Mercy was so evil looking. I mean, can that guy look more Satanish on that album cover? And then you turn the album cover around, Jeff Hanneman playing the Les Paul with a upside down cross. As a kid, I was very, very there was such an impression on Satanism. Even though I didn't practice Satanism, I read the Satanic Bible, and believe me, that was funny. That was insane. But I'm not a Satanist. I never was a Satanist. But goddamn, did they write some damn good songs about Satan? Black magic, Satan's fall, man. Come on. That to me is like the ultimate music at the time. And also in the early 80s, you had Black Sabbath releasing an album with a song called Disturbing the Priest. Damn, that was some good times, man. Because the world was so much different back then. There was a whole satanic panic going on. You know, all these church groups, and I would love those church shows. They would, hold up satanic albums. I wish I had those things on video, man. I know I have one somewhere. But I've seen several of these shows on religious channels. Religious channels would plug the hell out of all these bands I love. You know, they would show like these album covers of, Wasp and stuff, and the Mentors. I remember seeing them on a religious channel. I'm like, my God, I love these religious shows. You know, they're bashing it. Watch out. Your kids are going to get possessed by the devil listening to this. You know, and back then, I mean, I think about it how the world thinks about that shit back then. I mean, we all knew it was a joke, man. I mean, of course, there's loonies in every group. So, yeah, you're going to have some satanic people sacrifice their friend in the forest. That did happen in the 80s during the Satanic Panic. But that was like, an isolated incident. Well, anyway, seemed to get off the subject there. Getting back to Paul Di'Anno saying that Iron Maiden wasn't part of the new wave of British heavy metal. And I'm like, it reminded me of when I first started YouTube, like over 10 years ago. And I had that Black Sabbath channel, the Eternal Idol channel. And I remember back then I was getting comments from people going, "You are the greatest YouTuber ever." And I was like, get out of town, come on. I'm just here talking about Sabbath. I'm not the greatest YouTuber ever. Lay off the crack. But now, looking back on it, they were all 100% right. Looking back on it, I was and still am the greatest YouTuber ever. But, it was hard to see it back in the early days. And that's the same thing with Paul Di'Anno. He still doesn't see it. He still doesn't see Iron Maiden as, the leaders of the new wave of British heavy metal. I see it. But then again, I see how I still am the greatest YouTuber ever. Anyway, what do you all think of Paul Di'Anno with not thinking Iron Maiden was part of the new wave of British heavy metal? And for those of you that think that I am not the greatest YouTube ever, keep that to yourself, okay? Do it for my ego. And please, subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Subscribe to the greatest YouTuber ever. And click that little notification bell. And like the video, because it's good for the YouTube algorithms. So stay frosty. Listen to Black Sabbath. And smack 'em a gob.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain. For we've received orders for to sail back to Boston. And so never more shall we see you again.